Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the March 3rd, 2023 Hydralander point update for the Hydralander format. In addition to the point updates, I will also be giving a bit of discussion right now, overlaying a couple of the current philosophies in terms of trying to balance the format or put the points where we want them to be to help cultivate a play experience that supports a majority of the player base, or for having more and more players come on into the format. If you have any questions about this, or any questions about any of the point updates that happen in here, go ahead, leave a comment down below, hop into the Discord, come in, make a discourse, and we can talk about it and figure out where everybody sort of is with all of these different pieces to the format. So, to start with a discussion about current format philosophies, there has been a discussion among a section of the player base that has constituted to a proponents of a mid-rangey format. What do I mean by a mid-rangey format? By a mid-rangey format, I mean there being forward and backward, multiple turns, recycling resources, kind of trying to pin down your opponent over multiple interactions on multiple turns. What this enables is that there are a lot of decks in a Hydralander nature that don't go all in on their opening board. They either make up one interaction plus set up a strong resource engine, maybe they set up two interactions, try to set up for a counter push, or there are some decks that have as an added feature of their deck that they try to OTK the opponent. You know, thinking kaijus and dark holes and being, I'm going to summon big guys and then smash in. And when those are a featured pivotal point of a deck, it gives that deck more of an identity. There are some decks in Konami's design recently that has had this feature of having multiple interactions going first, having a strong resource loop, but then also just being able to kill your opponent. And what that ends up leading to is that if you don't have a strong enough deck to follow up with in the meta, you just end up getting steamrolled. So if they set up their opening board, they interact with you 1 to 2 times with like a pop and a negation, you can't follow up, and then they just kill you with like 8,000 or 9,000 points of damage, and it's kind of wild. As an example that we have previously hit on the points list, I'm going to use Tearlaments. They have their interactions of Kaleido Heart and Rulu Kalos, in addition to maybe they set up a Sulliak, maybe they mill a couple of Shizu Shufflers, but also their boss monsters just have 3,000 attack points natively, and their field spell boosts them by an additional 500, meaning that it is very easy for them to introduce a counter-lethal push if you don't do a ton of interactions on your sometimes potentially one turn that you get to open up with. Following up with that, we now see Kashtira also having a similar thing, where they can set up some strong interruptions. Their interruptions are literally just sitting on Fenrir and Unicorn sometimes in this format, as opposed to going into the long TCG combo lines. But then their guys also just have 2,400, 2,500, 2,800 attack points, their field spell boosts them all by like 300, and then you're dead. They also have their continuous spell, Kashtira Birth, that allows them to summon back out from the grave, Trap Card allows them to summon back out from Banish, a powerful resource engine as well. So, spoiler alert, we are planning on hitting Kashtira more on this list, but I also wanted to share some of that, we are trying to promote more decks to line in with that mid-rangey nature. And if you disagree with that, or if you have any questions about it, please let us know. So now we're going to be getting into the point changes. First up, we have Pressured Planet Wraithsoth from the Kashtira deck, going from 0 points to 3 points. This is a very powerful field spell that not only boosts the Kashtiras, but also boosts Tearlaments as well as Scareclaw, because they have Kashtira Scareclaw, Kashtira Tearlament. It allows them to have much more versatility in searching, while also allowing these other off-Kashtira decks to more easily run cards like Set Rotation or Terraforming, because they have more additional field spells they want to go into, which allows them to get more searches, more engine, just overall boosts the power level of the deck. In addition, it makes the Kashtira engine and or splash much more versatilely searchable into any deck trying to splash them in through the same cards of Terraforming. Maybe they can run a Set Rotation, maybe you're running it in with a much larger package that just wants big guys. Due to the overall power level and due to the impact that is made, we are putting Pressured Planet Wraithsoth to 3 points. You can still run an entire spread of Kashtiras, Fenrir, Unicorn, and Wraithoth, but that puts you up to the 10 points there. In addition to hitting the Pressured Planet, we are also hitting Scareclaw Lightheart. Now, admittedly, this is not for Scareclaw. This is also another Kashtira hit, as we have seen Scareclaw Kashtira performing at the highest level in this format, since any Scareclaw is able to go into the feared planet Reichphobia for the Scareclaws, which then lets them get into Kashtira Scareclaw, which is then a Kashtira, which allows them to get into all of their Kashtira plays. It also allows them to have this powerful backup plan, or part of their primary plan, of being able to make the Link 3 Scareclaw, which is like a Baguska, which allows it to sort of floodgate the opponent. It's very hard to kill. It's kind of like a Towers, which is a very, very powerful pivot that Scareclaw is able to go into. So, for the overall interactions it has with the Kashtira deck, we are pointing it such that the Kashtiras now have to decide between their points of being able to have the Scareclaw backup, or being able to run all of the Kashtira cards as we've outlined previously. You can still run all of the Kashtira cards, and you can still run all the Scareclaw cards in their own decks, but when you get into that mix and match between them, you now have some interesting decisions that you have to make. So for the power level that it has with the Kashtiras, as well as just the power level of its own, one Scareclaw can just represent 3 Link material. We are putting Scareclaw Lightheart to 2 points. Next, we have the Ishizu Millers. So Tearlaments, while we have all their points up, they were still able to run these 2 cards in with the rest of their deck spread, allowing them to go through the Kitkalos Shuffle, where you Kitkalos into one of the Mill 3s, either a Murley or the new Tearlament Kashtira. And off of that Mill 8, you would be very likely to hit at least one of these 2, which will then mill 5 more, which will allow you to hit the next one, which will allow you to fill 5 more. There was a very high probability that the Tearlament deck could still mill over half of its deck when it was able to pop off. And that is just too powerful. And these cards are both powerful in of their own right. Kelbet is still just a hand trap, they still just mill 5, the Earth Fairies, they have all those interactions. So a tiny bump here from 0 to 1 to price them out of the Tearlament deck, but also to still keep them low for people who want to fill them in for their decks. It doesn't cost them so much to put them in. Lane-Cross and Summon Sorceress. We were getting spicy last list. We're getting very spicy. We put them to 0, see what people could do with them, see what they could experiment with. Turns out they kind of still do what they did in the TCG. They do very long combos. They sometimes do FTKs. They sometimes do FTK-esque combos where you make like 5 interruptions plus some walking macro or whatever it is. And overall, they lead to a lot of these opening boards that do not promote the interactions that were being described earlier of a more mid-rangey style. They promote very all-in, and then if you get stopped, then someone dies, as opposed to having these longer, drawn-out mid-rangey decks. So they're still both powerful cards that warrant being put back to 2 points. But, for example, with Summon Sorceress, as opposed to putting it all the way back up to 3, where we were barely seeing any experimentation with it, we're just putting it to 2 in the first place. In addition, they had a very powerful interaction with many of the Isolde combo lines, potentially even the Halki Fibrax lines, if we saw experimentation with that. So putting them to 2 points means that with your Isolde or with your Halki Fibrax, you could run one of them, either Link-Cross or Summon Sorceress, but you would not be able to run both of them to do the very long, like, FTK-esque combos. Speaking of Isolde, we've done you dirty. Isolde was sitting at 7 points, right underneath Halki Fibrax for a majority of the format. Isolde is less generic because it doesn't use a tuner. It's exactly Warriors. But turns out that Warrior package is very, very good right now. Being able to add the Immortal Phoenix, being able to make it off of an MX Saber Invoker, being able to go through many different pieces of material, Isolde deserves the respect of being bumped up to 8 points. In addition, to just sort of clarify, we're not going to piecemeal out the points of being like Isolde is at 7, we put Phoenix Gearfried to 1, we put like Renauld to 2. We're trying to isolate as many of the pivotal cards into one of them so that we can keep the list as small as possible. So Isolde here is getting a bump up to 8. And to just clarify, it still puts us in the position where you can't run both Link-Cross and Summon Sorceress with Isolde. You have to choose which one you want to run. Baronne de Fleur. Also has been done a little dirty. Baronne de Fleur is a level 10 synchro that is a generic Omni Negate. See, Borreload Savage Dragon. We have that pointed very highly because we didn't want decks to be looking like the TCG of just making a ton of just Omni Negates, lock them out, make sure they don't do anything. And we took Barone off the list to partially make space and be like, how many decks can really make a Synchro 10? Well, turns out that if a deck really tries, they can just make a Synchro 10. And then they just have this Omni Negate, and it's probably one of the better things you can do in terms of being an Omni Negate on your opponent's turn. So, giving Barone some respect, putting it from 0 to 1, also making it part of these like wombo combo end boards that tend to happen with a lot of these combo enablers being allowed in a format. It makes it harder for you to piece out your end board pieces, your comboing pieces, and then your consistency pieces, Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, and such. So Barone, you're getting a bump from 0 to 1. And doing Madolche the respect they deserve. So one of the things I mentioned at the very beginning was this mid-rangey back and forth. And Madolche has a very, very strong recursive engine. It allows you to go infinite with like Chateau, and then Ticket, and then Promenade, and then you can go into Glass Soufflé, shuffle back the Chateau if they destroy it, make sure you always have it, and then everybody comes back to your hand. Tons and tons of guys. Really good recursive engine, and it sets up like one Omni Negate plus a shuffle in the opening turn. So, it's a couple interactions plus the recursive engine. One of the things that Madolche has going for it, though, is that it can also very easily just kill you going second or on the follow-up. And part of that is in the power of Madolche Queen Tiramisu. The Madolche Queen being able to non-targeting shuffle back any 2 cards on your opponent's board is very, very powerful. And that's part of what gives Madolche its lethality. Of just being like, any problems? Send them away. And sometimes Madolche Queen goes to the graveyard, you shuffle it back in, summon a second one, send back 2 more cards, and you can just rip your opponent's board apart, and with the Chateau bonus, you just kill them. Extra 500 on everybody, makes them all absolutely massive. So, just to acknowledge the power of Madolche, and to, take it down a little bit. Maybe they can't run all the Kashtiras anymore, because that was one of their very popular supplementary engines. Maybe they have to get off Pot of Greed now. Just to take them down a notch, we got Madolche Queen Tiramisu going from 0 to 2 to also exemplify some of that focus we have in terms of the changing philosophy. On the point decreases, we got Goes in Match, There Can Be Only One, and Rivalry of Warlords. These were put on the list a while ago because they were stifling a lot of creativity, trying to figure out what a lot of good decks could be for the format. We have a little bit of a metagame figured out. There's still a lot of space to explore, and each of these floodgates is kind of good and kind of bad in their different respective matchups. So if you were to just run, the floodgate deck, sometimes you just have dead cards in your deck, sometimes you have really good cards in your deck, and sometimes it locks you out of playing, sometimes it locks no one out of playing. They can be very hit or miss in a very, very blanket kind of fashion. But if you're running a deck that's specifically like, oh, I'm a good Goes in deck, it is a tool that some decks could have to fight against different things that end up happening in a format. So to take them off the list, to make some more space, and to also just put them back into maybe some decks could actually play them every now and then, floodgates are going from, these floodgates are going from 1 to 0. Our spicy pick for the month for people to experiment with is Topologic Gumblar Dragon. A lot of the generic combo-y tools were at 0 last time. Link Cross and Sun Sorceress are back up to 2 points. Let's take Gumblar down to 0, see what people can do with it. It supposedly hand loops a bunch. We don't have all of the multiple non-once-per-turn Dark Worlds in the format. You get 1 Snow and 1 Brow, and that was primarily how people were hand looping people a bunch. Maybe there's a Goki Extra Link deck that can try to make it work, but This is the hit of try to see if you can do something with it. It was legacied onto the point list at the beginning, at the inception of the format, and it just hasn't really seen any play, hasn't seen any experimentation since. So let's take it off, see what it can do, then see where should it be on the point list after that. A couple of these sort of like maintenance kind of picks of like things that have just kind of been on the list but could move around a little bit. 1 for 1 has been at 1 for majority of the format because of, in the inception, there was a concern of people pivoting into just running all of the best 1-card engine starters back when the format was 60 cards large. And 1 for 1 would allow you to pivot between a ton of different engines, be it a Print Kit engine, a Psy Reflector engine, or any other level 1 engine that kind of comes out. As the format has grown to where it is now, in the 30-card to 60-card variation, decks aren't randomly throwing in every engine they possibly can, and a deck needs to have a reason and or purpose to actually run 1 for 1. You need to have a good level 1 starter in your deck. So, because 1 for 1 already now bakes itself into being it's only played in specific decks, and even then, it's just another consistency tool that requires a neg of 1 card from hand. 1 for 1 is going from 1 to 0. Allow people to play with it. And a very powerful limited card in the TCG that is seeing almost like no play in this format whatsoever. Foolish Burial. We all know the power level of this card is there. It has a place to be played, but at 2 points, it's currently fighting against hand ripping options. It's fighting against Pot of Greed. It's fighting against a lot of other things right now. That's meaning it's just not seeing play. While it's a very powerful card, and we don't want to take it off the list completely, for example, we'd be buffing up tier limits with that, and that would be a concern. Foolish Burial, we're putting down to that sort of 1 point place, where similar to why 1 for 1 was previously at 1 point of being very good in a large number of decks, Foolish Burial is now going there. It's very good in a large number of decks. It should cost some points due to its power level. We're going to see if that 1 point is where it is, where people start sliding it in. Maybe they run it over Called by the Grave. Maybe they run it with Called by the Grave as opposed to another 2 point option. That's what we're currently looking at there. So, those are the point changes for March 3rd, 2023 for the entirety of the month of March. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, any concerns, always please let us know. We're always trying to build the community. If you think this format's interesting, share it with some friends, get people in, try to catch some games. We're always trying to make Smart happen. If we can get a lot of people coming in, we can start trying to run tournaments, start getting a lot of community feedback, and this could grow and go somewhere. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Always watching for any more other episodes. Please give us a subscribe if you're interested. And, as always, I wish you guys absolutely wonderful, and please, take care.